Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is keeping safe and I hope you're not getting too bored being forced to stay at home. Now, everybody needs to devise ways to cope with the situation. Personally, I paint figurines like this one. Don't know if you can see it. This was a while ago. Yay, it's nice, isn't it? And, play computer games and read history books. Now, I'm actually curious to know what you guys are doing home to keep busy, so let me know. Speaking of history, I noticed that last time many of you copied from each other and copied from the internet. Please don't do that. Okay, for one simple reason, it's useless. It really is. 9 times out of 10, you get the wrong answer because you're Googling the question without the proper context and paste everything from the first website that comes up. It takes time, and in doing so, you learn absolutely nothing. Okay, so all the information you need is in the transcript and in this video. Okay, reading it or watching it takes exactly the same amount of time as Googling it, and there might even be the chance of you learning something instead of just copying and pasting things from the internet. So please, don't do that. I will notice, I know how you write, I know how articles are written on the internet, and I will notice if you copy. If you read something and rephrase it with your own words, means that you need to read it, means that you need to understand it, and then change the wording. That is acceptable. Straight copying and pasting, that's just useless. So don't do that. Don't waste your own time. Do something else instead, like watching this video, or reading the transcript, or learning something. Now, let's close this, stop this bracket of thought, this diversion, and let's go back to the 1930s. What did we talk about last time? I will give you 5 seconds to think about it. Now, we looked at the reasons why the Weimar Republic, the state that ruled Germany before the Nazis, okay, immediately before the Nazis, was weak. Okay, we looked at the transition from the German Empire to the Republic. First it was an empire, then it became a republic, and then it became the Nazi state. Then we looked at the economic troubles of the republic, and at its social issues, its social problems, and finally at its political problems. For today's lesson, we are following a very similar scheme, and we will discuss the economic, social, and political reasons of Hitler's rise to power, keeping in mind the weakness of the Weimar Republic that we discussed last week. So here is a list of reasons. Economic reasons, we will talk about the events of 1923 and the crisis of 1929. Social reasons, the communist threat and the lack of trust in the Weimar Republic. And political reasons, so the Weimar Constitution, the way it was structured, and Article 48, one specific article of the Constitution. Economic, social, and political. Now, we'll go through these 6 points, one by one. Let's start with the economic reasons. For each point, we will see how it affected Germany and how it helped the Nazis gain more power in particular. Okay? So, the events of 1923. How did it affect Germany? If you remember, we mentioned it several times. In 1923, French and Belgian troops occupied a region which contained numerous coal mines, which were useful for industry, and the 1920s and 1930s were all about industry. And, of course, factories. They did this, the French, in order to get paid for the war reparations that Germany owed them since 1918. Okay, remember, war reparations, Treaty of Versailles. Now, this led to a huge economic crisis in Germany. If you're here next year, we will probably discuss that again. And to the growth of anti-French sentiment. People started hating the French a bit more. Even more than after 4 years of war, because they said, we fought the war for 4 years, and now you're occupying our country because you want even more money from us. This is ridiculous. And I can see the point, okay? And the French have always been the traditional enemies of the Germans, especially in this age of nationalism. The French were seen more than ever as the enemy of the nations. How did this help the Nazis in particular? Now, when there is this situation, when there is an increased nationalistic sentiment in which we, the Germans, must band all together against the enemy, the French, okay? When there is this sort of situation, people look at nationalist parties like the Nazis, which were an extremist nationalist party. And they said, we'll make Germany great again, we'll kick out the French. And in a way they did. Bit of an extreme reaction, but they did. And yes, so people started to agree more with the Nazi party. Now, second point in the economic section, the crisis of 1929. Now, how did it affect Germany? The Wall Street crash of 1929, which led to the collapse of the American economy, had catastrophic effects on Germany, which was not able to recover until well into the 1930s. 6 million people were unemployed by 1933. 6 million people unemployed, 6 million people without a job, without an income. What do? How do they buy food? How do they buy clothes? Nobody knows. It was a huge crisis, okay? When we say the word crisis, we cannot we cannot make it immediate and concrete. But we have to think about what would we do if we were in a similar crisis, and it might actually happen soon enough. So yes, 6 million people were unemployed. We're asking the government for help, but the government was unable to help. Okay, the government was forced by the situation to cut the benefits they would give to unemployed people because there were too many of them and they didn't have enough money, and increase taxes on the people in order to get more money for the benefits. So this combination of policies made the situation even worse because unemployed people were getting less money, and those who were still lucky enough to have a job had to pay more taxes. So there was this spiral of a bad economy, which was making the life of a lot of people more difficult. How did this help the Nazis? People were going through difficult times, and as we said, there were millions of them. So the promises made by the Nazis, they said, we will fix the economy. How did they promise they would do that? Simply enough, by recreating a strong army. Okay, the proposals were actually pretty complex, but the main point was we will recreate a strong army, we'll make Germany great again, we will take our place back among the great economies, we will conquer half of Poland, which they did, and then the entirety of Poland, and then parts of Czechoslovakia, and then the entirety of Czechoslovakia. So they promised that by recreating a strong army and by using it to conquer the regions around it, they would lead Germany out of this terrible economic crisis, and people believed them and supported them. Okay, so those are the two economic causes of the rise of the Nazi Party. First, the events of 1923, so the French occupation of the Ruhr, and second, the crisis of 1929, how this absolute collapse of the German economy made people agree with the Nazis because they promised solutions. Now, second point, the communist threat. Remember, politics in this period was all about communists versus pretty much everybody else, okay? The communists, remember the Workers' Party, they wanted to destroy private property, they wanted to create a different kind of society, and they were gathering support in Germany because they were an extremist party, except that, like the Nazis, except that the Nazis were extremely nationalist, while the communists were extremely leftist, okay? They wanted to get rid of the Republic and create a new state in its place, but the state they wanted to put in its place, where they had completely different ideas about it. Since, okay, I lost my train of thought. Yes, the communists were gathering support because they were an extremist party, but their political project is let's abolish private property, let's get rid of religion, and a lot of other things that the communists wanted to do, was disliked by most of the German population, which still liked religion and still liked private property. My stuff is mine. I don't want to give it to the state. And they were suspected of being paid by the largest communist state in the world, the Soviet Union, which they were, to be honest. In many cases, it's complicated. But yes, so people disliked the communists because they were linked to the Soviet Union. How did this help the Nazis? The Soviets were seen by the Germans as the enemy, okay? First of all, they were Russians. And at this point in history, Germans had a long history of mistrusting and going to war against the Russians, which dates back to pretty much the beginning of early modern German history, sort of. And communism as an ideology, as a system of ideas of we should do this and we should do that, was seen by many as a godless and evil ideology, okay? Because they wanted to get rid of religion, because they wanted to get rid of private property. I'm simplifying it a lot, but a lot of people saw it and still see it as a godless and evil ideology that we cannot support in any case. The Nazis took advantage of this, okay? They capitalized on this. Capitalized means taking advantage. And used their propaganda to make the communists look even more dangerous than what they actually were. And we will see a good example in a few minutes when we'll talk about the fire at the Reichstag. In 1933, the German parliament caught on fire and the communists were accused. Was it true? Was it not true? We will never know. Matter of fact, this fear of the communists was used by the Nazis to gather support. Lack of trust in the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic, remember, was the republic that was in Germany. Now, how did it affect Germany? Now, the Republic had so far been unable to take any serious measure against the economic crisis. They were unable to lead the country out of the economic and social troubles of the late 1920s. Also, we have to remember that Germany did not have a long tradition of democracy. Their democracy was very young and very new. Most of the population was used to be ruled by an authoritarian emperor or by an authoritarian state. How did this help the Nazis? Now, many people saw that the Republic did not work as a system. They were nostalgic of the good old days of the Kaiser and agreed with the Nazis when they claimed that Germany needed a strong dictator, needed a single person in control, able to take decisions and get rid of this republic that was unable to work. And those were the two social problems, which were the communist threat, we discussed it at length, and the lack of trust in the Weimar Republic as an institution. Moving on to the political causes. We need to talk about the Constitution of the Republic of Weimar. Without going too much into detail, the German Constitution at the time, the Constitution is, once again, the document that explains how a state should be run, the essential law of the land. The German Constitution was extremely complex and complicated. It was structured so that no one single person or institution could hold any significant amount of power. What did this mean? This meant that there were complicated and clunky rules that prevented effective decisions to be made in short times, which made economic recovery even more difficult. How did this help the Nazis? This was done in order to prevent the emergence of authoritarian rulers like Hitler, because the system was devised exactly to prevent that. If no one has any power, no one will become an authoritarian dictator. However, in times of uncertainty, everybody started to doubt about the effectiveness of this system. They said, okay, if the system is so unable to take decisions and to actually lead the country to safety, why should we preserve it? Wouldn't we be better off voting for the strong man the Nazis promised us? Spoiler alert, they were not. But at the time, they still didn't know the future. They didn't know that World War II was going to happen, and so many of them trusted Hitler and believed in his message for whatever reason. Another political uh, cause of Hitler's rise to power was Article 48. Now, the Weimar Constitution, which we just described as being extremely balanced in order to prevent anyone from accessing any form of power, had a secret weapon, Article 48. This article, an article is like a bullet point in the list of laws. Okay, law number 1, law number 2, this was Article 48, law number 48. This article was designed to allow the President of the Republic to make laws without going through Parliament, meaning that it allowed to bypass the complicated system we just discussed. Since the situation in normal times was very confused and deadlocked, the President made constant use of it in order to be able to take any form of decisions. Now, if you've been listening, you're probably thinking, okay, if nobody takes any decision, the public opinion is not happy and sides with the Nazis. If someone use Article 48, then someone will be taking decisions and the people will be happy. Not quite. Many people saw the fact that the presidents were using Article 48 a lot and say, okay, the president is already behaving like a dictator, is already behaving like an emperor. So why should we even continue with this pretense of having a republic? We should just call it a day, give all power to the Nazis. I'm simplifying it a lot, remember that. Now, Article 48 had another, even more important role in turning Germany into a dictatorship. Okay, in 1933, this is important, the Nazis won the elections, fair and square, sort of. And a few days later, the Reichstag, the German parliament, was set on fire, as we said, allegedly by communist insurgents. And the key word here is allegedly. It is very likely that it was just a rumor created by the Nazis themselves in order to make people fear the communists even more. Now, Hitler took his chance to ask the President of the Republic, Hindenburg, to give him special powers under Article 48, okay, to bypass Parliament, bypass people discussing and approving laws, and just give him all the power, give him full control of the country. And he did, because he said that it was a matter of national security. And this allowed him to turn Germany into a police state, okay, a state that is thoroughly controlled by the police and by the military, where with the threat of communism, all forms of expression like freedom of expression, all sorts of freedom like freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and individual privacy, they were denied, all in the name of national security. He said that the country is in danger, therefore give me all the power, I will take care of it. Except that possibly he made up the danger. It was the first and fundamental step in establishing the Nazi dictatorship in Germany, because now there was no one else left to keep them in check and they had full control of the country. Now, those are the facts. Again, we looked at the economic reasons, at the social reasons, and finally at the political reasons why Hitler was able to rise to power. Now I would like you to answer this question, which is at the top of the transcript. Why did Hitler rise to power? Okay, thank you very much for your time. Also, remember to fill the Google form and all that, but you're pretty good at doing that already, so see you next time.